We often judge others by their appearance without knowing the story behind it, but sometimes just one wrong moment can become a valuable lesson. Changing a life. Join me in watching the touching story of an old lady and a supermarket employee. Where kindness and tolerance have created unexpected miracles. Don't forget to like if you find this story meaningful and share it with your loved ones, if you want to continue watching inspiring and profound stories like this. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss any videos. One peaceful morning. Sunlight filtered through the small window, illuminating an old house on the edge of the city. That was where Dorothy lived. A black woman in her 70s with a small figure but bright eyes, filled with the resilience of years gone by. Dorothy was a single mother who worked hard to raise her only son, Daniel. She did not have an easy childhood, living in a time of severe racial discrimination, enduring contemptuous looks and taunts, but Dorothy always believed that self-respect and perseverance would get her through it all. Her house is simple but neat, reflecting the simple personality of the owner. A small table in the corner of the living room holds a framed photo of Daniel as a child and his certificates from high school to college. Now Daniel has become a successful, famous businessman. But Dorothy still lives as simply as ever. Every day, she would wake up early to tend to the small vegetable garden behind the house. For Dorothy, farming was not only a way to save money but also a small joy that helped her relax. She never complained about her life, because for her, this peace was the result of the sacrifices she had endured over the years. That morning, she decided to go to the supermarket to buy some supplies. In her small bag, she carried a list of necessities and some cash, money she had carefully saved from her meager pension. She didn't want to burden her son. Even though Daniel had offered to help financially, Dorothy was proud of her ability to be self-sufficient, as she had been when she raised her children alone. She put on an old but clean coat and a pair of worn but sturdy shoes. Before leaving the house, she paused for a moment. Looking at the framed photo of Daniel, a small smile appeared on her face. "I'm fine, son," she murmured as if talking to her son. As Dorothy stepped out of the house, she had no idea that today's trip to the supermarket would turn out to be a huge turning point, not only changing her life but also a valuable lesson for the people she met. Dorothy entered the large supermarket in the center of the neighborhood. Bustling with people, the doors opened automatically, revealing a brightly lit space with neatly arranged shelves. She took a deep breath, adjusted her old bag on her shoulder, and walked slowly inside. Dorothy didn't often go to big supermarkets like this. She usually went to smaller stores near her home where the staff were familiar and friendly, but today, she decided to come here because she wanted to buy some items that the small store didn't have. She pushed her cart through the aisles, carefully selecting each item on her list: a carton of milk, some bread, and a packet of the cheapest coffee. Sometimes she paused, picked up an item, then put it down again, considering carefully before making a decision. A natural saver, she made sure every penny she spent was worth it. When she had finished picking out her things, Dorothy headed to the checkout counter. She chose the shortest one, where there was only one young cashier. He was in his early 20s, wearing a green supermarket uniform, but his shirt was wrinkled and unprofessional. On his chest was a name tag that read, Kevin. Kevin was chewing gum, his eyes glued to his phone instead of paying attention to the customer. When Dorothy placed her shopping cart on the counter, he slowly raised his head, his eyes glancing at the old lady indifferently. "Are you ready to pay?" Kevin asked, his voice drawling lazily, not bothering to hide his impatience. Dorothy smiled slightly and nodded, "Yes. I have already chosen." Kevin began scanning the items, his hands reluctantly. He occasionally glanced at Dorothy from head to toe, his eyes slightly judgmental. "Here's the total," he said, pushing the order value screen toward Dorothy. The number displayed wasn't huge, But to Dorothy it sounded like a careful calculation. She slowly opened her bag and took out a small wallet. Inside were neatly arranged bills. Dorothy counted each one, making sure she had not made a mistake. Kevin stood with his arms crossed and his feet tapping as if he didn't want to waste any more time. When Mrs. Dorothy handed him the money, he suddenly smiled faintly. "Are you sure you have enough money?" Kevin asked, his voice laced with sarcasm. Dorothy paused, raising her head slightly to look at him. Her eyes showed a hint of surprise. But she kept her voice calm. "I thought enough before coming here." Kevin took the money, counted it quickly, and frowned. He looked up, his voice growing louder. "You're short, it's not enough." The people around them started to look back at them. Some looked curious, some shrugged. Not wanting to interfere, Dorothy looked at the money in Kevin's hand and calmly replied, "Count it again, I think this is enough for what I bought." Instead of checking carefully, Kevin suddenly laughed. "Are you kidding me? I can tell you can't pay, don't waste my time." The words rang out clearly, like a knife cutting through the air. Dorothy felt a chill run through her heart. She had never been treated like this in public before, but she did not let her emotions get the better of her. Instead, she kept her voice steady and said, "You can call the manager if you don't believe me, I don't lack money." Her confidence made Kevin momentarily flustered, but he quickly covered it up with a look of annoyance. He counted the money again, half-heartedly, and then realized Dorothy had given him the exact amount. "Ah, enough," Kevin muttered, his voice low, but instead of apologizing, he just threw the bill back and gave his change carelessly. Dorothy gently picked up the bill without saying another word. Before leaving the counter, she looked at Kevin, her eyes no longer sad but disappointed. "Thank you for paying for me," she said, her voice small but meaningful. "But next time, treat your customers with respect. Everyone deserves to be treated well." Kevin didn't reply, just shrugged and turned to the next customer, but a feeling of unease began to creep in, not because of what Dorothy had said, but because of the judgmental eyes of the people around him. Dorothy left the checkout counter and walked slowly toward the door, but her story at the supermarket did not end there. Something unexpected was about to happen. Something that would make everyone who witnessed it that day think deeply about how they judge others based on their appearance. Dorothy had just received the bill and the change, but the disappointment in her heart was still heavy. Kevin's disrespectful words had stabbed at her heart, bringing back difficult memories from her youth when she was often judged for her appearance and circumstances. However, she did not show it, maintaining her composure as she had done all her life. Kevin, after paying Dorothy's bill, continued to serve other customers. But he still felt uncomfortable. The eyes of a few people around him were fixed on him, somewhat judgmental, making him restless. A few whispers rang out. "He is so rude. That old lady clearly did nothing wrong. I really don't know what he is thinking." Although Kevin pretended not to hear, the whispers only made him more annoyed. He turned to look at Dorothy, who was about to leave the counter, and blurted out loudly, "Do you know? If you don't have any money, don't bother others next time." The words seemed to tear the silence apart. Everyone around turned to look. Some people gasped, not believing what they had just heard. Dorothy stopped and turned to look at Kevin, her eyes calm but solemn. She slowly walked up to the counter, put down her bag, and looked straight at him. "Do you know that not everyone is as lucky as you, having the opportunity to stand here, working and serving others? I have lived long enough to know that arrogance and disrespect only lead to mistakes you will regret later." Dorothy's voice was not loud, but every word she said resounded strongly, causing everyone around to fall silent. Kevin was embarrassed. His ears were red, but he still tried to maintain a strong appearance. "Come on. I'm just telling the truth," Kevin snapped. Trying to justify himself, "Do you know how many people come in here and buy stuff and don't pay for it? I'm just doing my job." Dorothy looked at him for a long moment before nodding slowly. "If you do your job, do it with respect, don't be so quick to judge anyone by their appearance. Not only does it hurt others, it also takes away your own dignity." Dorothy's words made the atmosphere tense. A few customers around her began to nod. Agreeing with the old lady, a young woman standing nearby stepped forward and placed her hand on Dorothy's shoulder. "You are wonderful, old man," she said. "The way you talk is so admirable. Don't let other people's attitudes upset you." But Kevin still refused to admit his mistake. He sighed, shrugged, and returned to his work. As if to brush it all off, Dorothy took one last look at him, shaking her head slightly. "You will understand what I mean one day," she said, her voice sad but not angry. Dorothy picked up her bags and walked away. She didn't want to argue anymore. Life had taught her that sometimes silence and action are the best answers to those who are not ready to listen. However, as she reached the door, a voice came from behind. "What's going on here?" All eyes turned to a middle-aged man wearing a supermarket manager's uniform. He had an authoritative yet friendly appearance. Approaching with a questioning look on his face, Dorothy stopped and turned to look. The manager glanced at Kevin, then turned his gaze to Dorothy. Instantly realizing something, his expression changed. From curiosity to surprise. Then finally to respect. "Old Dorothy," he exclaimed, "my goodness. I never expected to see you here." Dorothy looked surprised. But she smiled gently. "Hello. I just came to buy a few things." The manager turned to Kevin, his eyes stern. "What did you say to him?" Kevin stuttered, not knowing how to respond. He had never seen his manager react like that to any customer. "Dorothy was Daniel Johnson's mother," the manager said, his voice growing firmer. "You know Daniel Johnson? One of the most successful businessmen this city has ever seen." Everyone in the supermarket seemed to hold their breath. Kevin's eyes went from bewilderment to panic. He took a step back, as if he couldn't believe his ears. Dorothy just smiled slightly, looked at the manager and said, "No need to make a big deal out of it. I'm just an ordinary mother. And today I came here like any other customer." But clearly, things had changed. No one in the supermarket dared to look down on Dorothy anymore. And Kevin realized that his mistake had been much bigger than he had thought. The atmosphere in the supermarket was frozen. All eyes were on Dorothy and Kevin. The cashier, who stood there, staggering, his eyes wide, the manager, Michael Thompson, was still trying to regain his composure. But his face was clearly filled with shock and respect for Dorothy. "Miss Dorothy, I am truly sorry for the way our staff treated you," Michael said, his voice strong but sincere. "We would never tolerate such disrespect, especially from valued customers like you." Dorothy smiled gently, her eyes shining with calm. "It's okay, Michael, I understand that everyone has their own pressures at work. The important thing is that we learn from our mistakes to improve customer service." A few customers around breathed a sigh of relief. Sensing the change in the atmosphere, Kevin, still embarrassed, bowed his head to the ground. "I'm truly sorry, Dorothy. I didn't know I was so wrong. I promise to try to improve my attitude." Dorothy walked over to Kevin and placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Kevin, everyone makes mistakes. The important thing is that you recognize them and are willing to change. Don't let impatience get in the way of your progress." Kevin looked up, his eyes filled with gratitude and remorse. "Thank you, I won't let this happen again." "Mr. Michael looked at Dorothy with deep gratitude. "You are truly a respectable woman. I am very proud to know that the mother of a successful businessman like Daniel Johnson is supporting our store." Dorothy smiled, her eyes looking far away. "Michael, I'm not here for my son's fame or connections. I just want to buy some things for my family. but if it helps your store improve its service, I'm happy to help. Michael felt a sense of pride. We will conduct a refresher training for all employees on how to treat customers. This will not only improve service but also build trust from customers. A young woman standing nearby, who had put her hand on Dorothy's shoulder, stepped forward and said, "You are truly a shining example to us. Your patience and kindness have inspired everyone here." Dorothy looked at the young woman, her eyes filled with appreciation. "Thank you. Everyone can make a difference. No matter how small, as long as we always treat each other with kindness and respect." The surroundings seemed to lighten up. Other staff members began to approach, some bowing their heads in apology, while others gave Dorothy gentle smiles. Kevin stood silently, feeling the warmth from everyone, and determined not to let it happen again. Dorothy picked up her bag and prepared to leave the counter. Before she left, she turned back to Michael and said, "Michael, let's make sure everyone understands that respect is not something to be asked for, it is the foundation of any relationship. Whether it is between a customer and an employee or between colleagues." Michael nodded, determined. "I promise." "Dorothy, thank you for helping us realize this important thing." Dorothy smiled and walked out of the supermarket, greeted by everyone. As she walked down the main aisle of the supermarket, she felt a change in the atmosphere around her. There was no longer tension, but a warmer and friendlier atmosphere than ever before. A moment later, she stopped outside the supermarket door, took a deep breath, and felt the calm of the morning. The sunlight shone on her face, highlighting the wrinkles that had marked the years. Dorothy looked up at the sky, thinking about the past few hours. She recalls the hardships she has endured in life, from her days as a young woman struggling to raise her children alone, to times when she was judged solely on her appearance. But through it all, she remained resilient and held on to her dignity. And today, she proves once again that kindness and patience can overcome prejudice. A car stopped at the side of the road, and a young man got out. It was Dorothy's only son, Daniel, returning from a business trip. When he saw his mother, he stopped, smiled broadly, and approached. "Mom, are you okay?" Daniel asked, his voice filled with worry and love. Dorothy smiled happily. "I'm fine, Daniel. I just got back and had a very special day." Daniel looked around and noticed people he knew from the supermarket laughing and chatting happily with his mother. He knew right away that his mother had had an important experience today. "I see you happy," Daniel said, his eyes filled with pride. "I am proud of you. Mom, you have always been an example of kindness and resilience." Dorothy walked over to her son and hugged him. "Thank you, Daniel. I always try to do what's best for our family, but today, I also learned that sometimes we need to stand up for our own and others' respect." Daniel closed his eyes in his mother's arms, feeling her warmth and strength. "You're right, I think today's experience will make you and our store better." Dorothy pulled a small piece of paper from her purse and clasped it in Daniel's hand. "Here's Michael's business card. I want to make sure his store treats its customers with respect and kindness. Not only is it good for business, but it's also good for the community." Daniel took the business card and looked at his mother with admiration in his eyes. "I will support you all the way. Together we will make things better." The mother and daughter duo left the supermarket together, walking down the main aisle under the bright sunlight. Today's supermarket event was not only a personal experience for Dorothy, but also a small step in creating positive change in the community. Dorothy felt a deep peace in her heart. She knew that no matter how difficult life was, with patience and kindness she would always find her way to respect and love. The supermarket doors slowly fell silent after Dorothy and her son left, but inside, Kevin was still reeling from shock and regret. He looked around, feeling the eyes of his co-workers and customers on him, a mixture of disappointment and criticism. Although Dorothy had not blamed him, her kindness made him feel more guilty than ever. Mr. Michael, the manager, walked up to Kevin. His voice no longer as harsh as before but full of sternness. Kevin, I think you need to understand how big a mistake you just made. That old lady is not just an ordinary customer, she is the mother of Daniel Johnson, a famous businessman and also an important partner of ours. Kevin was stunned. Not believing his ears. Daniel Johnson's mother? You mean Daniel Johnson, the founder of Johnson Enterprises? He stuttered. His voice choked. That's him. Michael nodded, his face becoming more serious. Not only is Daniel a successful businessman, he is also known for supporting charities and improving community life. Think about it. If the mother of such a person was treated with disrespect, what consequences would we suffer? Michael's words were like a bucket of cold water poured over Kevin. His mind was spinning. He remembered the way he had treated Dorothy, the contemptuous looks, the sarcastic tone, the unfounded judgment. All of it now weighed heavily on his shoulders. A nearby colleague who witnessed the whole thing interjected softly. Don't you know? That old lady is an icon in this area. Many people know her for her resilience and kindness. She worked very hard to raise her only son, and now Daniel is so successful because of her. Kevin was silent. Feeling his chest tighten, he mumbled, I don't know. I've done so many mistakes. Mr. Michael shook his head. But his voice softened. Kevin, mistakes are a part of life. But what matters is how we fix them. You need to learn to treat everyone with respect, no matter who they are. Meanwhile, outside the supermarket, Dorothy and Daniel got into the car. As Daniel was about to start the car, he turned to his mother, his voice filled with concern. Mom, do you want me to talk to Michael about what just happened? I can't accept the way they treated you. Dorothy shook her head, her eyes calm but firm. No, son, I want people to learn from real experiences. If we just use power to impose, they will not truly change from within. Daniel nodded, understanding. He knew that his mother always used kindness to teach others, even in the most difficult situations. Mom, I'm proud of you for facing it so strong and calm, he said, his voice full of emotion. Dorothy smiled gently. I don't do it out of pride, Daniel. I just want to remind everyone that they deserve to be treated fairly, no matter what they look like or where they come from. Meanwhile, inside the supermarket, stories about Dorothy began to spread among employees and customers. Some who knew her family well shared their own inspiring stories. One elderly customer recalled, I lived next door to Dorothy when I was young. She was a strong woman who was always willing to help her neighbors. She may not have had much material wealth, but her kindness was priceless. Another employee added, Daniel Johnson himself said in an interview that his mother was the biggest inspiration in his life. He always spoke of her with respect and love. Hearing those stories, Kevin felt even more remorseful. He remembered Dorothy's kind eyes, the way she handled the situation with calmness instead of anger. That feeling made him realize that respect is not just about being polite, but also about how we see the true value of others. Kevin decided to do something to make up for his mistake. He walked up to Mr. Michael and said, Mr. Michael, I would like to take a day off to go see Mrs. Dorothy and apologized to her in person. Mr. Michael looked at Kevin, surprised by his change of attitude. Do you really want to do that? It would be the right move, but make sure you do it with all sincerity. Kevin nodded, his eyes shining with determination. I need to do this, not just to apologize to her, but to learn how to be a better person. Outside, Dorothy and Daniel continued their conversation. Daniel turned to his mother and asked, Mom, I always wondered why you never let me use your name in my projects. You are clearly my biggest inspiration. Dorothy smiled gently. Daniel, I don't need recognition. I just need to know that you are living a life you are proud of. treating people with kindness, and doing meaningful things, that is enough for me. Daniel held his mother's hand tightly, feeling her love and the great sacrifice she had made for him, in his heart. He knew that his mother was the reason he could stand firm in this challenging world. Dorothy looked into the distance, her eyes shining with hope. I don't want my life to be just another old story, Daniel, if possible. I want everyone I meet to learn something about kindness and forgiveness. Daniel smiled, filled with respect. I promise to continue the mission you left me. Together we will create positive change, starting with small things. The car rolled away from the supermarket, leaving behind the admiring eyes of everyone, but for Dorothy, this was not an end. She knew that her journey would continue, and what she did today would forever resonate in the hearts of those who witnessed it. Kevin spent the evening after work thinking about it all. The supermarket incident was not just a professional mistake, but also a profound lesson in how he viewed others. Regret gnawed at him constantly, especially when he remembered Dorothy's calm but forgiving gaze. The next day, Kevin decided to take the day off work to visit Dorothy. Before leaving, he stopped by a flower shop and picked up a bouquet of pink carnations, which he had heard symbolized respect and gratitude. He also bought a small gift box of handmade cookies, hoping that she would feel his sincerity. On the way to Dorothy's house, Kevin was nervous. He didn't know if she would accept his apology. Questions kept running through his mind. Will she send me away? Has she completely forgotten about this? How can I repair the damage I've caused? When he arrived at Dorothy's gate, Kevin felt his palms were sweaty. The house was small, simple but warm. Surrounded by a lush green garden, he stood in front of the door, hesitating for a moment before knocking. The door opened and Dorothy appeared with a gentle smile. She was surprised to see Kevin standing there, but quickly realized why he had come. Hello, Kevin, how are you? She asked, her voice soft but not without concern. Kevin bowed his head, holding the bouquet and gift box tightly in both hands. He stammered, his voice choked up. Madam, I came here to apologize. I really regret what happened yesterday. I didn't behave properly, and I don't know how to make it up to you. Dorothy smiled, placing her hand on Kevin's shoulder. Come inside, we can talk in a more comfortable atmosphere. Inside, Kevin placed the bouquet of flowers and the gift box on the table. Feeling the warmth of the small house, the furniture was neatly arranged, with many family photos on the wall, pictures of Daniel as a child, photos of mother and son at big and small events. All told the story of a family full of love and sacrifice. Dorothy poured Kevin some tea, then sat down across from him. So, what do you want to say? She asked, her eyes not blaming him. Kevin took a deep breath, trying to gather his thoughts. Grandma Dorothy, I was wrong to judge you by your appearance. I didn't know who you were. But that doesn't matter. What matters is that I didn't treat you as a human being worthy of respect. I'm so sorry for my inconsiderate and thoughtless attitude. Dorothy listened quietly, her face remaining calm. When Kevin finished, she said softly, You know, Kevin, what upsets me the most is not the way you treated me, but the way you are treating yourself. You seem like a nice young man, but sometimes we let prejudices or the pressures of life cloud our minds. Kevin was surprised. He had not expected that. While he was blaming himself, Dorothy would care for him. Do you really think so? He asked, his voice laced with emotion. Dorothy nodded. We all make mistakes, Kevin. What matters is that you recognize them and resolve to make amends. Your apology today is the first step, and I can feel your sincerity. Kevin felt a great burden lifted. He smiled, but he was still not completely satisfied. Dorothy, I want to do something to make it up to you. Is there anything I can do to help you? Dorothy looked at Kevin, her eyes shining with warmth. If you want to help me, Help the people around you, learn to look at them with respect and kindness. That is the best way to make it up to me. But also to yourself. Dorothy's words were engraved in Kevin's mind. He promised her that from now on he would live more responsibly, not letting prejudices guide his thoughts and actions. Before leaving, Kevin thanked Dorothy again. She walked him to the door, the gentle smile still on her face. You may have made mistakes, Kevin, but you faced them bravely. That's really admirable, she said, as a final encouragement. Back home, Kevin kept thinking about his encounter with Dorothy. Her words and her forgiving attitude became the motivation for him to change. The next day, when he returned to work, he decided to tell his colleagues the story, not hesitating to admit his mistake. I learned a valuable lesson, he told the group during a break. You can't judge a person by their appearance. Everyone has value, and they deserve to be treated with respect. Kevin's story spread throughout the supermarket, becoming a lesson not only for him but also for the entire staff. Dorothy, although not present, was still the one who sowed the seeds of that positive change. After meeting Kevin, Dorothy sat quietly in her small house. Old memories flooded back, as clear as if they had happened yesterday. She did not blame Kevin, because she understood that life's hardships sometimes make people behave inappropriately, but her story, her life, was a testament to resilience and unconditional love. Dorothy was born and raised in the American South during the difficult years of the last century, when racial segregation was still prevalent. Her parents were simple laborers, working hard in the cotton fields to support the family. From a young age, Dorothy witnessed injustice and prejudice against black people. But her parents always taught their daughter to maintain self-respect and faith in the future. You can't change the way people see you, Dorothy's mother once said, but you can change the way you see them. When Dorothy reached adulthood, she married a man named Harold, a talented but gentle carpenter. They had a son, Daniel, who was her greatest pride. However, life was not easy. Harold died when Daniel was only 10 years old, leaving Dorothy to raise her son alone amidst many hardships. Dorothy never let the loss of her husband defeat her. She took on every job she could, from cleaning houses to laundry, to make ends meet and support her children. There were days when she ate only one meal so she could save money for Daniel's books, but no matter how hard it was, she always taught her children that education and character were the two most important things. Daniel, thanks to his mother's sacrifice, became an excellent student and later received a full scholarship to college. Dorothy remembers clearly the day she saw her son off on the bus to school. She stood silently by the side of the road, tears streaming down her face, both proud and worried. Remember, she told Daniel, never let your circumstances define who you are. I believe you can do it. Daniel did not disappoint his mother. After graduating from college, he began a career in the technology industry, a field that at the time had very few black people. Through talent and perseverance, he quickly rose through the ranks and eventually founded his own company, providing innovative technology solutions. As the company grew, Daniel missed his hard-working mother. He sent her money regularly, but Dorothy always refused to accept too much. I'm fine, she said, as long as you're happy and doing the right thing. I'm happy. Daniel was not only successful in his career but also in his family life. He got married and had 2 children. Every weekend, he took his whole family to visit his mother. At those times, Dorothy's small house was filled with the laughter of children, easing the loneliness of old age. Looking back on her life, Dorothy has no regrets. She went through difficult years, faced loss and prejudice, but importantly, she never lost faith in humanity and the future. Dorothy understood that her life was not only a story of sacrifice and resilience, but also a testament to how small actions can make a big difference. She always believed that if you treat others with kindness and tolerance, life will eventually respond. These memories make Dorothy appreciate the present moment even more. She understands that her story is not to brag or demand recognition, but to remind everyone that everyone has a past, a journey of their own. Sometimes, just by listening and understanding, we can see the true value of a person. Kevin, in this story, is not a villain. He is just a young man, like many others, searching for meaning and his place in the world. Dorothy believes that through this encounter, Kevin will learn the same lessons of humility and tolerance that she herself has learned in her own life. By retelling Dorothy's story, this section not only highlights her inner strength but also explains why she is able to face Kevin with such calmness and compassion. This sets the stage for the next events in the story, where Dorothy's lessons will spread not only to Kevin but to many others. After meeting Dorothy at her home, Kevin returned to work with a completely different mindset. Before, he had worked just to make a living, often scowling at customers and not caring much about their feelings. But after his experience with Dorothy, he felt the importance of respecting others and seeing them with their hearts, not just their appearances. Kevin began to adjust his attitude at work. He smiled at customers, greeted people who seemed difficult, and listened patiently whenever he felt frustrated. He remembered Dorothy's calm but profound gaze and her words, "You can't change your circumstances, but you can change the way you see and treat others." Kevin's transformation has not only affected the way he works, but has also spread to his colleagues. People who used to see him as irritable are now surprised by his friendliness and professionalism. Some young supermarket employees even come to him to ask for his work experience and how to handle difficult situations. The story of Dorothy and Kevin spread among the supermarket staff, especially after Kevin decided to share the incident publicly at a staff meeting. He frankly admitted his mistake and recounted his encounter with Dorothy. "She taught me that each of us has a story. It is important to take the time to listen and understand instead of rushing to judgment." Kevin's words moved many employees. Some who witnessed him yelling at Dorothy that day also began to rethink the way they treated customers, especially the elderly or those in difficult circumstances. After the meeting, the supermarket management decided to organize a soft skills training course for all employees, focusing on building compassion and a positive attitude at work. They also established a new rule requiring employees to prioritize respect and professionalism in all situations. Dorothy and Kevin's story spread beyond the supermarket and into the neighborhood. A customer who happened to witness the incident shared the story on social media. The post quickly received thousands of likes and comments, most of whom expressed admiration for Dorothy's generosity and Kevin's change. One of the prominent comments read, "The old lady not only taught a supermarket employee a lesson but also reminded us all to look at others with kindness, a small story with a big lesson." The local community began organizing activities to help the elderly, especially those who lived alone like Dorothy. A group of young volunteers from the neighborhood regularly visited Dorothy to chat and help her with her daily tasks. Dorothy, with her calm demeanor and warm heart, became an inspiration to everyone around her. Dorothy herself felt a new sense of joy. She had no idea that her life would impact so many people. In the days that followed, she received frequent letters of thanks from strangers who said her story had made them rethink the way they treated others. Her son, Daniel, was also very moved when he heard the story. He decided to hold a small party at Dorothy's house, inviting some neighbors and supermarket employees to attend. The party was not only an opportunity to thank everyone but also to honor the kindness and tolerance that Dorothy had spread. Since meeting Dorothy at her home, Kevin has visited her often, not only to express his gratitude but also to learn more from her. He realized that Dorothy was not only a strong woman but also a very wise person. The stories she told, the advice she gave, all helped him become a better person. "Grandma Dorothy, I really appreciate you for forgiving me," Kevin said during one visit. Dorothy smiled. "There is nothing to forgive, Kevin. I just hope you use this lesson to do good for yourself and others." Kevin gradually came to regard Dorothy as his grandmother. He often brought her small gifts, from cakes to interesting books, in return. Dorothy was always willing to share her valuable life experiences with him. The story of Dorothy and Kevin went beyond just them and became a symbol of positive change in the community. Locals began to organize more volunteer activities, from helping the elderly to donating to families in need. Dorothy, though just a simple old lady, became a strong inspiration to everyone. Kevin, from an impatient supermarket employee, became a leader in promoting change. Spring came, bringing warm sunshine and abundant life to the small neighborhood. Kevin, after many visits to Dorothy, decided to organize a special event to honor her. He planned it with the help of his colleagues, neighbors, and Dorothy's son, Daniel. That day, Dorothy was invited to the supermarket, where everyone had prepared a surprise ceremony for her. At first, she refused, saying that she was just an ordinary person and did not need to be honored, but Kevin convinced her with sincerity. "Mrs. Dorothy, this is not only to thank you, but also to let everyone know that your kindness and forgiveness have changed many people, including me." When Dorothy entered the supermarket, she was surprised to see the space decorated with colorful balloons and signs that read, "Thank you Dorothy, Inspiration." Dozens of supermarket employees, customers, and even neighbors were present to express their gratitude to her. Kevin, in his neat uniform, stepped onto the small stage located right at the checkout area, where it all began. He took the microphone, his voice trembling but sincere. "Today, I want to say a special thank you to Dorothy. You not only taught me a lesson, but also helped me realize the true value of kindness and patience. I know I was wrong, but thanks to you, I learned to correct my mistakes and become a better person." After Kevin's speech, everyone applauded enthusiastically. Several supermarket employees who had witnessed Kevin's transformation also shared their feelings. They talked about how the story between Dorothy and Kevin inspired them to treat customers and colleagues better. Dorothy's son, Daniel, suddenly appeared in the crowd. He walked up to the stage, hugged his mother and said, "Mom, you always said that kindness has the power to change everything. I saw it today. I am proud of you not only because you are a wonderful mother but also because you are an inspiration to so many people." Dorothy shed tears. But they were not tears of sadness but tears of complete happiness. She had no idea that the simple things she did could leave such a deep impression. To close the ceremony, Kevin presented Dorothy with a special gift, a bouquet of red roses and a small plaque that read, "In honor of kindness, Dorothy, who taught us lessons of tolerance and love." In addition, the supermarket manager also announced an important decision. A portion of the supermarket's revenue next month will be donated to charities that support the elderly, as a way to pay tribute to Dorothy and spread the kindness she sowed. After the ceremony, Dorothy returned home, filled with emotion. She had no idea that her small act could spark such a chain of positive changes. She believed that if everyone did their part, the world would become a better place. Kevin continued to visit his grandmother regularly. From a simple supermarket employee, he became a responsible and well-liked person. He also participated in community activities, especially programs to support the elderly, as a way to make up for his past mistakes. Dorothy, with eyes full of hope, often sat by the window, watching the rays of sunlight shining into the small garden. She knew that her journey was not over yet. The lessons she shared, the feelings she gave, would continue to live on in the hearts of those around her. The story ends with Dorothy and Kevin working in the garden on a peaceful afternoon. As the first flowers of spring are blooming, Dorothy turns to Kevin, smiles and says, "That's life. My dear, sometimes we come together to learn how to be the best versions of ourselves." The story ends, but the message resonates: compassion, tolerance, And the ability to make amends are what make a person truly valuable.